Hello, everybody. This is Steve Struggle with Abraham, Dr. Abraham, and we are here talking today about news and events, updates around the political world, and wanting to get you involved in the mass struggle so humanity can live better than it's living today. How are you doing today?
Much better, I dumped the medication that was leaving me, like dizzy and tired. And that was bad enough. The consequences are like falling. So, here we are. We have to take care of ourselves and we have to take care of the world. And that's what we're doing here, right?
There you go. There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot happening. Lebanon has really been in the center of a lot of the world's focus these days.
Yeah.
Um, there have been videos put out by Electronic Intifada showing last week's successful self defense actions against the Israeli invaders, the occupiers of southern Lebanon, tanks, um, electronic warfare, trucks, um, different kind of military outposts being successfully assaulted with FPV drones, and Israel, even a statement that I found amazing that was on the internet yesterday, quoting unnamed senior Israeli officials saying that the United States and Israel had failed to accomplish its targets in the war with Iran,
Hmm.
and at this point, yeah, at this point, they are not the winners. And
Mhm.
if the war were to end today, the United States and Israel could make no claim to victory,
Mhm.
which is a very humbling statement from the Israeli side.
Mhm.
Um, I sent you, I think, a video of Douglas McGregor, who is a white supremacist, by the way. He is a white supremacist,
Mhm.
um, a former colonel.
CIA. Yeah,
Yeah,
CIA guy. Yeah.
and he was Douglas McGregor was basically saying that the United States is through in the Middle East because of all the damage that was done to its bases, successfully carried out. That whatever damage has been or will be done to Iran's military can be rebuilt, and that Iran's military is intact. Also, it's pretty apparent that these negotiations, even though the Iranians are not saying it, at least my view, the negotiations are just stalling tactics and ways to prolong the war, just like the United States is using the same tactics in the Ukraine situation. They apparently don't have any intention of stopping the war
Hmm.
because the goal as I see it is to extend the war and to bleed Iran like that they claim they wanted to bleed Russia.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the negotiation, even though they claim they want the Straits of Hormuz, quote unquote, open, time will tell. Because as I understand it, and I can be wrong here, the last shipment of oil that wasn't impacted by the war will reach or has reached Western and Asian ports, and all there's expecting to be a major price hike in oil and gasoline, everything related to oil and gasoline next month and in July.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's likely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've noticed that the United States, well, what's the United States? There's different factions there, like Trump himself, he's concerned about his public image, not in the world. No, in the United States of America, because the midterms are coming up. So his sort of whole concern is, survival. Okay, so, he's, making, in French, we say semblant, pretending to be negotiating with Iran, trying to, bully Iran into making major concessions, and then, coming out as the victor. Iran is not susceptible to being bullied. Like they're united in resistance. All the factions in Iran are united in resistance. It's just a matter of, like how much resistance, is going to be offered. That is the only question, before the Iranians right now. So, but as soon as, Trump was acting conciliatory and saying that an agreement was coming up, which is up to him, like he can make an agreement anytime. He just has to make the concessions, that are necessary. Okay, so he made an announcement that the agreement was coming up, and he was getting, like a bounce in, in public opinion and in the stock market, etc. Okay, so then Pete Hegseth, as he's called, like because he's macho. So he's the Secretary of War, but Al Jazeera always calls him the Secretary of Defense because Al Jazeera is inclined, to support the United States of America and Qatar, even though Qatar is now reorienting itself. Okay, so Hegseth and the others, who are the Christian Crusader warriors, pushed on Trump to not make such concessions, and he started to back off, saying that they were going to be winning or something. Now, Israel wants to, scutter the whole sort of negotiations as well. They want the war against Iran to continue, no matter how, no matter, to what extent, and no matter if they win or not. They just want to make war on Iran to weaken it because they cannot tolerate an Iran that has become strengthened. So they're attacking to against Lebanon and Hezbollah in particular, which is an ally of Iran. Okay, and now they're talking about flattening Dahiyah. Dahiyah is a neighborhood in Beirut, the city, the capital city of Lebanon, where, Hezbollah supporters and leaders, live. So they want to flatten it like Gaza. And they keep on saying the word flattening, flattening, flattening 3 times. Okay, so that's what they are planning to do? Well, then Iran's going to have to respond and attack Israel directly because there's not going to be an agreement. Not because there's no agreement that's going to be made available because one, Israel, and two, because of the Christian crusaders in the administration who actually have control over the foreign policy despite Trump. So let me show you the video that you sent in that has this ex-CIA agent who's also a white supremacist, you tell me, but he's conceding that Lebanon is key, the key matter in this whole issue here. It seems, there's so many ex-CIA agents that are being interviewed, like on
Yeah,
Al
yeah,
Jazeera, like it's
yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree with what you're saying on that one. Yeah.
yeah, like to be interviewed on Al Jazeera, your qualification has to be, like a former member of the CIA, practically, like or an academic, who's safe enough, to interview.
Well, but not only that, have you ever seen too many or too many counterintelligence agents for the FBI? No. No,
Uh-huh.
no, 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 no. You don't see them. So I wonder about these guys sometime because they have a lot of dirt on what they've been doing in this country and around the world. They don't say anything. So they have to be usually their State Department or CIA. Everybody else, they shut their mouth.
Yeah.
They don't say anything. They don't say anything, or for some reason they give this CIA people a mouthpiece. But those who carried out the COINTELPRO, those who done work against the anti-war movements, there's a new one out now. There was a campaign in Honduras. There's some website called Honduras Gate, I haven't checked it out, but something's going on there. There's some new
Mhm.
data that's been released about the U.S. government's attack on Honduras, Mexico, Guatemala, Nicaragua. Just those sites are more, I think, more legit because they're taking leaked documents and sharing them, and they can show the validity of the documents. I'm not
Mhm.
saying the gentlemen who sit at ex-CIA aren't good, but sometimes I wonder what their role is because CIA people ain't supposed to be talking, right? I mean, right? No,
Yeah.
no, they're not. I mean, no, they will just shut up. It's CIA. I mean, because that gives them credibility in these circles. But to me, I have to wonder, what's your real purpose here? Because you are
Yeah.
ex-CIA. That's just
Yeah.
me. I'm sorry, it's just me. I
Yeah.
just don't trust them. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, they sound informative, they sound like they're in the know,
True.
but
Yeah.
they still have an agenda, they're still, brainwashed, they're educated by the
Well,
CIA in the first place, so their
Well, let me say
conclusions.
this one thing. I'm gonna say one. Now, this gentleman here, this gentleman is not a white supremacist. He's not. I thought you were talking about Douglas McGregor. No, this gentleman here is not a white supremacist. He isn't. No,
Oh,
he is
okay,
not.
good. Okay, glad that's
Yeah.
confirmed. Okay, let's hear what he
Yes.
has to say here.
All right.
The U.S. and Israel have lost on the battlefield, so to speak. But let me just go back to what Professor Morandi said about Lebanon. From a cynical realpolitik point of view, as an American, I would say, oh my God, those Iranians, they almost had a deal. They had a deal and then they insisted on including Lebanon. Why did they do that? Well, it's because the arc of resistance is a real thing. Iran cares about what happens in Lebanon, unlike the Gulf states that have rhetoric but no real support. So I would have to say that I have been edified by the insistence of Iran to say, look, this goes back to 1967, for God's sake. When I was on duty with the Central Intelligence Agency, what happened was a war of aggression. What happened was Israeli found a pretext to attack Egypt and the others, and a UN resolution number 242 in November of the same year, 1967, said unanimously in the Security Council that Israel re- remove itself from the occupied territories. Now, what are we talking about? These were territories uh, conquered by Israel. And later, Menachem Begin himself admitted, "Oh yeah, we weren't really threatened by Egypt. We just went ahead because we wanted to do it, and we could do it." Now, here we have the U.S., everyone else on the Security Council on record as saying Israel must remove itself from the occupied territory, and that includes Lebanon now. And so, what's going to happen here? Well, the world can see that it's the Iranians that are stressing, and even the Chinese. I'll just one more thing. The Chinese representative, a lawyer in Geneva, said, "Look, under the international law, occupied people have the right to resist, the arc of resistance. They have the right to resist with violence if need be." Now, no one likes violence, but that's in the law. Okay. It took a Chinese representative, a lawyer at Geneva, to remind us of that.
Okay, thank.
No, he's not. Uh, the U.S. and Israel have lost on the battlefield, so to speak.
Okay, well, we got the message. Like there's this general offensive of the fascist regimes in the world. And another example is Ukraine just bombed a nuclear reactor in Russia, which is the biggest nuclear reactor on the continent there. Incredible stupidity,
When
you
did
know.
this happen?
Y- Uh, just this last night, it just
Oh well,
happened.
then that's the end of that. That war's gonna end real fast. That's the end of that.
Yeah, I mean,
See,
European countries
no,
should. at least, oppose that, since they would be the ones hit by the radiation leaks. But it's Syria.
So
That's
you're
true.
saying that Ukraine has bombed? Was it the Zaporizhia plant they've been bombing for so long?
That's the one. Yeah. And they hit the turbines,
They
which is
hit
like,
the turn. See, we'll see. This is. I don't know what's going on with this war with Ukraine, but the United States is clearly involved in this. If they're involved in bombing nuclear weapons, they bombed the. Let me see. They bombed. What did they bomb? They bombed a Russian plant in where was this? What country was this? They bombed a Russian plant a few months ago. Somewhere the plant was bombed by I want to say Ukraine or Israel, but right, Israel bombed the Iranian plant, right? And Ukraine has been trying to bomb the Zaporizhia plant for so long, claiming that Russia was bombing the plant. But now, after Ukraine killed the students in the dormitories, and
mm,
Russia said we're going to be attacking Kiev, I guess the United States told you, or England told Ukraine, we'll go on and bomb the nuclear plant. Now,
yeah. Hmm.
they should not. I guess the mistake they're making in doing this is to assume that Russia will not simply wipe out the leadership of Ukraine. They will do that if it gets too crazy. They won't care. Because once you bomb a nuclear plant, I have the right to really to destroy your country. To me, I have the right since you're clearly going to cause, or maybe I don't have that right, but since you're clearly causing environmental damage for decades in a region, I have the right to retaliate in kind. And it might be the best thing to eliminate your government so it doesn't do it again. I'm just saying, as a head of state, I can think that way, and Russia can do it. They've been very patient with this war,
Yeah,
but
I agree.
and I mean, nobody can say they haven't been patient. Very patient because they've been trying to minimize collateral damage, etc. But when they attacked the girls in the dormitories,
Mm.
and Iran did not, I guess, did not choose to, wasn't going to attack Israel not in a summer way, but they didn't attack Israel. They attacked U.S. bases. So
Yeah.
they could have attacked Israel, but they didn't. The United States carried out the attack. And Iran right now doesn't have weapons to attack a military base in the Pentagon. They can attack the Pentagon. They can attack Lockheed base. They don't have that capacity, or they're not going to show it now. So they chose to attack the U.S. bases, which, so now since if this is true, what you're saying, and Ukraine attacked a nuclear plant, the United Nations should be a place where that should be condemned. And
Hmm.
then they have to go to the United Nations. You have to do that. And then you can then carry out retaliatory measures. But
Hmm.
to me, it's just
Yeah.
they've been up with this plan for so long. They've been bombing it for so long, and the IEA has been saying nothing. Oh
Yeah.
well,
Nothing.
you know,
Hmm. Oh,
uh, you know.
oh, yeah.
I'm sorry to go on that little tantrum, but it just bothers me. Ukraine has kept doing this for so long, and
Yeah,
now
this this was part of a whole series of escalations. Like
yes,
when the U.S. got away with, bombing the girls' school and killing 163 girls, Ukraine figured it could get away with doing the same thing and
yeah.
intimidate the population into putting pressure on their respective
Oh,
government, to back
wait
down.
a minute. There's a story that came out. I need to find that story. The story came out a couple of days ago. I need to verify the story. That on the first day of the war against Iran, the United States used a weapon of mass destruction against a civilian neighborhood. Um, I will get that story for our viewers. Get it to you next week.
Oh
It's
yeah,
been
they're using
documented. It's
munitions
been
that are like
documented. Yeah.
a ton. Like not, usually, previously, Israel was bombing Beirut with 500-pound bombs. I've seen the destruction of what a 500-pound bomb can do, to an apartment building, totally disintegrated. And I saw that, directly when I was there in 1980. Now they're using weapons that are much heavier than 500-pound bombs. And they're genocidal bombs because they don't, yeah, they're not limited to any particular target. They're just, going after the population as a whole. So, okay, they're going to start bombing Beirut, huh? So, Israel doesn't want the agreement to go through. Hegseth doesn't want any agreement with Iran to go through. Okay, so it won't go through. That means the war is going to continue. The blockade uh, by the United States on Iran continues, but not with any great effect. And the control of the Strait of Hormuz continues on. Like there was just 25 uh, commercial ships that went through the strait with the agreement of Iran just this last day, but no ships that service uh, any ally of the United States of America are going to get through there. And that's the way it is. That's the way it's been for quite a while now. And that's the way it's going to be until the United States backs down. And they're going to have to back down, but they won't back down. No, they have to, but they won't. So, okay. International economic crisis coming up. And
Sure is.
the only hope that Trump has at this point, with Hegseth, is that, they escalate militarily enormously, and cause enough damage that they can claim that they have some kind of a victory and then go into the elections with that kind of a, aura. In spite of the fact that Trump, was trying to, play the role of the great peacemaker and win the election on that basis. Well, it's not happening. It's not going to happen. So they have to have, some sort of a major military breakthrough in order to claim credibility. Otherwise, they're going to be flattened in the upcoming elections. In spite of, their manipulation of the voting, in spite of their manipulation of the voting areas by gerrymandering, still they will lose. But Trump still has his solid base of support of 30% amongst the Christian evangelicals in the United States who don't know nothing else but, what Fox News is telling them. So he's got, his skates on. He's still rolling away, so I don't see how this is going to end, easily and anytime soon. And, that's the way it is. Now, Iran is reacting with some emotion to this because I saw yesterday on Press TV from Iran, which is still going, which is, like excellent otherwise, because, it's featuring a lot of, women narrators, women analysts who are coming on, women academics who are coming on and being interviewed by women narrators, like Press TV, most of the narrators are now women. But there's one guy who sounds, like he has like no education and can barely speak, but, speaks, good English with a good accent, so he's there. He was interviewing this American guy, he came to Iran, and he's featured, in this interview at length, in which he starts mouthing off and saying it's the Jews who are attacking Iran, who are the problem. He uses the term the Jews, which is typical, of anti-Semitic, speech. And, it went, passed through on Press TV without, being contested, without being qualified, without being, uh, like countered by the Iranian narrator who let it pass. This kind of direction is, fascist. And, uh, any people can go fascist, if they don't have an alternative. And this is what's being pushed, at this point. And then there's, so many uh, who have come to support the anti-war movement, like Tucker Carlson, who is also anti-Israel. And it's Israel's fault, the United States, has taken on this impossible task, when in fact, Hegseth is sitting there as the Secretary of War, and he controls the military, dismissed, 20 generals, dismissed, the head admiral because he didn't want to go along with, with this war drive. And yet, it's Israel, and even more so in general, the Jews, quote unquote, who are being blamed, for the war on Iran. Huh. And Israel is helping, to create that image by its invasion of Lebanon. So, but does Israel have the support amongst the Jewish people to do so? No. The new polls indicate the majority of Jewish people, like 52%, are opposed to this war game. And amongst the Jewish Americans who are younger than 35, it's a much higher percentage who are opposed. Many support a two-state solution, and 24% even support a unified society with binational representation, although it doesn't mention the right of return for the Palestinian refugees. Nonetheless, there's tremendous support for the Palestinian cause amongst the Jewish Americans, and especially amongst young Jewish Americans. And this is undeniable. And this is something that I can bring up, in my legal case that I'm suing the Zionist organizations here in Canada for having denied me entry to the Jewish community campus, denied me entry to the Holocaust survivors meeting, denied entry to the Holocaust Museum, and denied entry to the Jewish Public Library, which has 4 of my books, and then had me put in jail for 5 days. Okay, so I'm suing them. Now their lawyer, is asking for, some kind of a settlement and not going to trial. I've refused that. I'm going to take them to trial, and I'm going to, dissect their whole schema. And there's witnesses, who are available, who will come and support me to that effect. So otherwise, sitting here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada is too frustrating. I feel like I have to get into the scene there, and I want to leave for Palestine as soon as possible now. And that's, what I'm looking forward to. And then we will continue the here and now from yourself in the United States of America. And then I will be broadcasting from Palestine, as a Jewish Palestinian and a resident in Palestine. So, this is what I'm looking forward to. And if I can't get my passport, because of their fascistic mentality in the Ministry of the Interior, if that's the case, then I'll sue them. But I will go anyway. And if I can become a passport holder and a citizen of Israel itself, then I would be very much into helping out the Israelis and helping out, the Israeli society escape from this deadlock, this prison that it's imposed upon itself, and prison in which they're in a war forever, constant war. And, that's the way the Zionist parties, both left and right, are, analyzing this whole relationship and this whole matter of existence. The existential question here is how to survive, not, whether to survive, by military means, which assumes that it will have constant victories, which has now been proven to be mistaken in the case of Iran. So, they should realize that if they escalate in Lebanon, that they're going to be treated the same thing in its own territory and reposted by Iran, which has the capability to do so. So, like it's insane that, the Zionist parties would continue, with strategy as such of militarism because they can't win. but they always figure, that they'll put themselves out on an edge there. The United States will come and save them. Well, that's not necessarily the case anymore. If Trump, is seeking, to come to some sort of an agreement with Iran, that means he's going to be dumping Israel, and Israel will be on its own in Lebanon, and they'll suffer the consequences. But not even that, it seems to be possible now because of the pressures, from the internal uh, war lobby in the United States, which includes the Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, in spite of him being called the Secretary of Defense by Al Jazeera constantly. That's what I see the current sort of, deadlock is all about. And I expect that this is going to continue as such, as a deadlock. And the world economy will suffer until, somebody more powerful than the United States of America will tell them, to cease and desist. But so far now, USA is being pushed further into a war game by both Israel and Hexit. So what chance does the anti-war movement have of stopping all of this? Well, the elections do offer an opportunity if people, figure out that there's some way to get into doing a vote there. And I don't sort of like saying it, but seems like we have to rely upon the upcoming election because the anti-war movement itself is not strong enough to take on the war lobby, which is entrenched in the administration. So, that's what we have to look forward to, which is like a measly little thing, a straw in the wind. But that's what we're facing right now, I guess. Do you see any way out of this, Steve? I think that there's nothing left to say about it. Yeah, there's no way out of this, really. So that's the way it is. And it's a pessimistic conclusion to come to. But nonetheless, the revolutionary movement, which is in power in Iran, and Iran calls itself a revolutionary country now, is seeking to end imperialism everywhere, not just, against Iran. This is a revolutionary government, and they consider that Islam is a revolutionary movement now because they're the Shiite tendency rather than a Sunni aristocratic tendency of the Gulf states. So the Shiite tendency, which is an international movement of religious persuasion, is taking on a political character and seeking to achieve a world revolution. This is incredible, actually. And they're moving ahead with this, and they're not backing down. This is, what Leon Trotsky talked about, in terms of a permanent revolution. That a revolution is not just, for one country. One country may start a revolution, but it doesn't end there, It's so the success of a socialist revolution in any one country can only succeed if the socialist revolution succeeds internationally. Otherwise, it'll be crushed, like Libya was. So, poor Libya. And now Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi is gone. But Aisha Gaddafi, a daughter of Gaddafi, is there, and she's political. But perhaps she will become a presidential candidate there whenever they have an election, which is not upcoming. It's supposed to be, but it's not. So there's this, like worldwide, balance of forces, which is being pushed in one way or the other. There's the resistance axis, in the world, the anti-war movement. And then there's all the fascist, administrations, which are into escalation mode right now. Wow. Let's see what's going to happen. But I don't think that we're going to be backing down. And those, like who have the military might and the finances to build more are there as well. But they've tried to do their trick, and it's not working. And right now, the status quo is not in their favor. So Like even if nothing changes, it's getting worse for the United States uh, economic domination in the world, the United States military domination in the world as well. Both are in a stasis mode. Despite all of their power, they cannot get ahead with their game. And the deadlock that is in place right now, that they cannot back down from, is cannot admit defeat, in the face of the elections coming up. Well, they're just, sinking themselves, in the long term further, together with the whole world capitalist economy. Okay, China's, sitting pretty, and they're getting their oil from Iran, and the United States has not been able to stop it, which is key. Trump went to China to speak with Xi Jinping and trying to get China to back off its support of Iran. But no, no, China doesn't have to because, China is willing to confront the U.S. military if they try to stop the Chinese oil tankers bringing their oil there. And even if they don't get the oil, they're willing to go for coal, which is like stupid, but they could do that. They're not in any sort of economic strife. They don't have to back down and support the USA against Iran because of economic pressure. No, they can withstand it. So that question, that alternative is ruled out of order, you know, ruled out of order by China and by Ping. Okay, so then who comes next? Everybody's coming to visit, the China, and Putin came, and he did the 40 economic deals there with even closer economic integration. We're going to build a pipeline with gas down to China from Siberia. And then who comes next after that? Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, and makes, an economic deal with China as well, dumping the United States of America. Canada, let me tell you, like when Trump says that the United States is self-sufficient in oil and is an oil exporter, he's lying, because 40% of American oil production doesn't come from the United States of America. It comes from Alberta, Canada, and the oil sands there, with the Keystone Pipeline, So if, Trump wants to play uh, heavy duty, with Canada, Canada just has to, increase the price of the oil that it sells down to the United States. So it just shut down that pipeline, and that would shut down the U.S. economy. We have got that power here in Canada, and Canada's waking up and is refusing to be the backyard of the United States anymore. Mexico too, same thing with the Sheinbaum, the woman, Jewish woman, president of Mexico, has just brought out universal health care in Mexico. So, like, why would Mexicans, want to go to the United States anymore? Life is better in Mexico now than it is in the United States of America. The US is, in a bind for so many different reasons. I don't see, like how it's going to make itself any better with its course of action. It's just getting, into greater and greater difficulties. Okay, so now the effects of this war are going to be felt, both inflationary and the Fed's federal bank's rate of loan is going to be going up in order to cope with the inflationary. That's the only thing they can do is raise interest rates to cope with the inflation to stop, the economy from overheating. So they're going to do that, which is going to kill their economy as well, and people are going to be losing their homes because they can't pay for the increase in mortgage rates that's going to be coming down the tube. So are Americans going to stand for all that? Well, first of all, we have to ask the Christian evangelicals, because even if, the rest of the Americans are wanting, to change everything, nonetheless, the Christian evangelicals are there. They're like a dam against the rising revolutionary reservoir, which is increasing, but is still being held back, by that block. And they've got guns, and they think that they need to use them for their own existential survival, because they think that survival of a Christian nation state indicates, their own survival. When in fact, their culture, whatever, can survive quite well without, the state having to support them. So, they should come to that realization at some point. And that's the way it is. That's enough of a conclusion for today for my part. Steve, I invite you to make a conclusion as well.
Well, I think you kind of covered it very well. The world situation and what's going on. I just want to encourage our listeners, our viewers, to get involved, to read, analyze, and don't be scared.
Oh yeah,
Just get involved. Get
yeah,
involved. Do what you're comfortable doing. Don't do anything more than you're comfortable with doing, and work with others to make the change the world needs.
oh yeah.
Thank you.
Like we say, what our slogan is: think, analyze, and act. The three pillars
Exactly.
of the revolution.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you for your analysis today. It was very, very helpful. I really appreciate you calling out the reporter, because we have to call it out when it's wrong. That's all. Yeah, we have to say something. You're right.
Yeah, and within the movement itself, like because there's two dynamics happening in the anti-war opposition. One is still fascist, and the other is revolutionary socialist, and we have to make distinction between the two, not into a
Exactly.
pot front, like with fascists, forget
Right.
it.
No, no, we can't do that. No, no, no.
You
Okay.
know, Tucker Carlson, wants to garner the an anti-war sentiment. He's realized, that it's unstoppable, that it is real, that it is true, and he wants it for himself, but we're not going to let him take it. That's it. That's all. Okay.